Flood prevention, President Buhari gives Minister 90 days to produce plan. House leadership, ministers, and central bank meet over issues in aviation sector. Rishi Sunak becomes new conservative leader, set to become new Prime Minister of Britain. Good morning, Nigeria. Today we shall discuss Nigeria's debt profile and subsidy regime. Nigeria's domestic and external debt stocks stood at 42.84 trillion naira, an equivalent of about $100 billion in June 30, 2022. That was about the same level as the figure for March this year, which was 16.61 trillion, or slightly over 96 billion US dollars, Kieran. Yeah, over 58% of the external debt stock are concessional and semi-concessional. All loans from multilateral or multilateral lenders such as the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, Afrexim Bank, and the African Development Bank, and of course bilateral lenders including Germany, China, Japan, India, and France. Well, by the end of June 2022, the total domestic debt stock was well over 26 trillion naira that accrued from new borrowings by the federal government to partly finance the deficit in the 2022 budget, as well as, of course, new borrowings by the authorities, including state governments. Exactly. And public debt to GDP as of June 30, 2022, was 23.06% compared to the ratio of 23.27% as of March 30, 2022, and remains within Nigeria's self-imposed limit of 40%. Now, although revenue generation initiatives in the non-oil sector are ongoing, as well as the blockage of leakages in the public finance sector, there are concerns still being expressed over the high level of debt service to revenue. That's because you earn money, but at the same time you spend virtually all the revenue you earn in servicing the debt, not just repaying the principal. And you know, all these the country's debt management office says Nigeria's total debt profile is now 41.60 trillion naira, and many insist the current funds dedicated to the oil subsidy should be removed and these funds channeled appropriately. Now, prior to 1973, that's now nearly 50 years ago, the price of petrol and other products derived from crude oil were fully determined by market forces to reflect the costs of crude, its processing, transportation, marketing, and in some cases, local taxes. Oil subsidy was first introduced into the country in 1973 as a palliative to cushion the landing cost of petroleum products delivered to refineries, following the needs to carry out turnaround maintenance on them. This has evolved into a social transfer mechanism to ease the burden of high fuel prices on the masses. Well, Kira, you're talking about the introduction of fuel subsidy. I recall one of the post-Civil War scenarios of fuel scarcity happened sometime around 1974, if you recall, 74, 75. It was around about Christmas time, and there were claims that there was hoarding, and you had long queues of
Peugeot cars in those days,
it was the first experience,
yes.
And people didn't enjoy that period at all.
Absolutely. Now, a recent report by NTA, which was presented to the House of Representatives Committee, states that fuel subsidy regime between 2013 and 2022 corrupt nearly 13 trillion naira. That's to say, for a period of 15 years, the country spent over 13 trillion naira on fuel subsidy. And of course, it continues to grow.
It's quite humongous. And meanwhile, at her presentation of the 2023 to 25 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper, the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, disclosed that the federal government plans to spend over 6 trillion naira on petrol subsidy payments in 2023 alone.
Well, this has, of course, elicited reactions from Nigerians, with many asking if the spending is worth it in the first instance for the benefit of all.
Exactly.
I spent so much on subsidy. Right?
Yeah, though many are still for the sustenance of the petrol subsidy. But others advise against it, insisting the resources can be deployed to other sectors of the Nigerian economy, particularly education.
Subsidy has always been a source of friction between the government and the labor unions, especially with the huge variation in the prices of products across the states.
Yes, and there have been complaints on the high level of fraud and corruption in the fuel subsidy scheme, as also seen in the report of the Presidential Committee on Verification and Reconciliation of Fuel Subsidy Payments between 2009 and 2011.
All right, so those are the issues that we shall be examining in our conversation segment on Good Morning Nigeria today, on which note we'd like to welcome you to this edition of the program. My name is Kingsley Osadolo. We are live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority.
Yeah, and I am Kirian Umar. We're reaching you live from the capital city of Abuja. We'll bring you the accompanying segments that will form the total package for today's edition. Now, let's join Nolene Ebelame, who has the morning news highlights. Good morning, Nolene.
Good morning, Kirian and Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria. Here is the morning news. President Muhammadu Buhari has welcomed the incoming British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. President Buhari says Nigeria looks forward to working closely with the incoming British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak across several fronts, including anti-terrorism, food security, energy access, and climate change. The Ministry of Water Resources has been directed to lead and coordinate with the Ministries of Environment and Transportation, as well as state governments, to develop a comprehensive plan of action for preventing flood disaster in the country. President Muhammadu Buhari's directive, which was conveyed to the minister in a letter signed by his Chief of Staff, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, said the plan should be presented to him in 90 days. President Buhari is regularly receiving updates on the flooding situation in the country and restated his commitment towards addressing the challenges caused by the disaster in the country. $538 million have been mobilized by the federal government and other development partners for the takeoff of Special Agro-Industrial Processing Zones program in Nigeria. The program is aimed at boosting food production in the country to prevent imminent food insecurity, enhance export, and provision of jobs for millions of Nigerian youth.
Pulling our economy out of recession, and is the single largest employer of labor. So we must incentivize agriculture through greater investments.
We believe that investment in food and food production is imperative for today, and investment in food and food production is imperative for our future.
For urgent actions are needed to prevent the food crisis in Africa.
Nigeria is the leading country in Africa. I mean, if Nigeria is hungry, Africa is hungry.
Pressing issues in the aviation sector, among them repatriation of forex by foreign airlines, may soon be resolved, as the leadership of the House of Representatives urges concerned parties to be reasonable in all approach.
The ban is in place because people are not being given visas, but the official date that you are supposed to stop flying is the 28th. If it's tied to the issue of repatriation, we are working on it.
You allow Air Peace or any other Nigerian airline to fly into your country. What Air Peace will do is that Air Peace will charge Naira, just like we also expect foreign airlines to charge Naira. But under BASA, every penny that the foreign airline sells in tickets, it must convert into dollars and take away.
What is left, what we have now, is $700 million.
A lie. I want to tell you a lie.
And you cannot even compare us with Ghana. The size of the aviation market in Nigeria is 40 times that of Ghana. 45 times that of Ghana. If you do the math, and my math is correct, 8 million times 45, it will give you about 360. We've been doing our best to ensure that we have taken this on board and we have resolved the issues. We never said that at any point the CBN or the government of Nigeria is not providing money to repatriate.
President Muhammadu Buhari has assured that the present administration will continue to support and promote policies and plans aimed at advocating the use of media and information literacy to create a peaceful and cohesive society where trust and respect for one another become the norm. President Muhammadu Buhari stated in his message to the opening session of the UNESCO Global Media and Information Literacy Week holding in Abuja.
As it is evident in our societies, getting reliable information is a constant battle. Media practitioners and stakeholders within the sector face the clear and present danger of misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation and disinformation are being used to aggravate conflicts and crises, exacerbate insecurity, distort government efforts, fuel apprehension among the citizens, and create distrust between the governments and their peoples.
It is aimed at equipping citizens with the ability to critically evaluate and wisely use information at their disposal. This is very important in a digital era of information overload, because it allows us all to differentiate what is true and what is false.
On court proceedings, the federal government says executing the judgment of the Court of Appeal which discharged the leader of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB Nnamdi Kanu, will jeopardize national security. This was the key player in the application of the stay of execution filed before the Court of Appeal. Presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress APC, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has enjoined Nigerians to shun religious and ethnic sentiments while casting their ballots in the upcoming general elections. He was speaking in Kano during a meeting with religious leaders as part of pre-campaign consultations in the state.
Economic centers. And leave Kano behind? No, it's not possible. It won't be successful.
Similarly, Northern Nigeria Christians Political Forum supports a Tinubu Shettima presidential ticket. This is part of agreement after their engagement with the Contact and Mobilization Committee of the All Progressives Congress in the Northwest. The meeting, which discussed issues of mutual understanding, has provided opportunity for the forum to reassure Nigerians that their decision to align with APC presidential candidate is based on his past antecedents and track record.
We are looking at capacity, we are looking at capacity, character, and the competence to deliver Nigeria onto us. And as Bola Ahmed Tinubu Shettima ticket signifies,
wants to show the whole world that everything about this politics
or everything about this 2023 is all about good governance.
For the first time that the Northern Christian Political Forum, they came together and based on political calculation and arithmetic, they agree that the candidature of Asuwaji Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Kashif Shettima is the best for the country.
They should go back to their state, to their local government, to their ward level, canvass support for Asuwaji Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
That's the morning news. Good morning, Nigeria continues with Kirian and Kingsley. After this timeout, please stay with us. I'm Nolene Ebel Ame. See you at 10 a.m.
Thank you. Hi there. You can price shop, but you're always saving on everything except for here. This is where you're throwing money down the drain. How? On this cleaning product. Impossible. You need the new Harpic toilet cleaner. With just 130 naira sachet of Harpic toilet cleaner, you save more. Harpic stick formula stays longer, so it cleans 10 times better. Wow, Helen! And it's safe because it's only 30 naira, giving you a sparkling clean toilet and great savings too.
My son has always dreamt of being in the spotlight. That's why I give him Bonvita for everyday vitality that gives him the strength to pursue his dreams. Bonvita, strength to dream.
We are all Nigerians. Against all odds, we shall and must remain united. We may have our challenges, our problems, and setbacks. However, together we shall overcome them all. What doesn't break us shall make us stronger. This is the mindset that shall bring peace, progress, and prosperity to our beloved country. Do not let tribal and religious sentiments govern how you think, act, or feel. Don't be influenced by those who want to destroy our precious national unity. Everybody who's a Nigerian is your brother and your sister. This is the mindset of the new Nigeria. It is also the mindset that we must all adopt. Let us support each other in creating the Nigeria of our dreams. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
The security challenges we have faced as a government have been daunting, from terrorism to banditry, to kidnapping, to separatist violence, to crude oil theft, to armed robbery and sundry crimes. It's undoubtedly the greatest challenge to the peace and security of our great country since the Civil War of 1967 to 1970. It's a kind of challenge that would have overwhelmed many nations. But thanks to the purposeful leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari, we can say, I want to repeat, that the worst is over and peace and security are gradually returning to the land.
This message is brought to you from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Nigerians, elections are here again. Let us shun violence. Let us play the game according to the rules. Do not be a thug. Say no to violence. Let's rise and defeat violence, crime, and sabotage against the peace of our nation. Nigeria is the only country we have. We must do everything to keep it united. We must avoid any act that promotes hate and disintegration. Say no to separatist movement, terrorism, fake news, hate speech, religious bigotry, and any act that tends to divide us as a nation. Watch out for strange gatherings and suspicious movements. Restrict access to sensitive documents and data, the disclosure of which may damage national security. Educate your staff and family, particularly on measures to safeguard information and report security breaches. Apply relevant legal security guidelines to protect yourself and your neighbors. Due to misinformation and wrong choices, some idle persons resort to vices in their greed to get rich quick. They resort to kidnapping, killings for rituals, and other heinous crimes. Avoid wrong use of the social media. Before you broadcast that false message, think twice. Ask whether it will promote peace or violence. for safety at home. Still, be security conscious. Educate your household on safety tips. Report all suspicious movements and persons to the security agencies nearest to you. Be a good citizen. Be patriotic. To pass security information, please call 0813-222-2105, 0915-339-1309, 0908-837-3514, or send a mail to dsspr@dss.gov.ng. This message is from the Department of State Services, DSS.
Yes, it's indeed nice to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria today. Now it's time for business news. The Director General of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Lamido Yuguda, says the West African Capital Markets Integration Program is aimed at creating an enabling environment for cross-border transactions in the sub-region. Details with Aleka Obanachi Arwa on business news.
Lamido Yaguda stated this at a meeting with the Director General of his Ghanaian counterpart, Daniel Tete, in Accra, Ghana. According to Yaguda, the enormous potential of cross-border listings of capital markets in the region is expected to develop a tool of cooperation to enable effective policing of respective markets. The SEC DG further explained that the enduring relationship between the two jurisdictions is more amplified by the fact that Ghana and Nigeria have the largest market in the West African sub-region, and it will only be foresighted that both countries seize the advantage of size and peculiarities and exploit viable areas of cooperation. Tete commended Yaguda, explaining that Ghana and Nigeria could push forward in ways that could bring about the mutual benefits of leveraging the capital markets. He also added that the region needs to open their markets to each other so that the countries could achieve more and attain one big capital market. With business news, Alika Opanachi Arwa.
Many thanks, Alika, for the business package on Good Morning Nigeria. Coming up next is Newspaper Review.
Well, now time for newspaper review, and we have two papers here. Let's see what the front page contents are. First, we'll begin with the Punch newspaper. The Punch newspaper, above the name flag of the paper, floods. Buhari demands action plan. Bias against donations. It's on page 12. Some Punch. Nigeria loses 3 million oil barrels monthly, according to the federal government. It's on page 24. External debt rises to $40 billion. The story is on page 19. Now, ASU, federal government to modify IPPIS in 3 months. That's on page 8. Now, the lead story on the Punch this morning, U.S. terror alert. Atiku, Tinubu, Obi demand security beef up, reject campaign suspension. 4 riders to that. PDP, Labour Party task security agencies on supporters protection at rallies. Police issue advisory, ask parties to fortify campaign venues to forestall attacks. We're on top of the situation. Defense headquarters and of course DSS. Now, no cause for alarm. APC, PCC. All right. Now, the photo story is that of the mansions there that we are told have been forfeited by the former Minister of Petroleum Resources. Dizani forfeits Abuja mansions, luxury cars to federal government. That's on page 27. And just below that, we have other stories. Reps summon Mbet boss over $43 million gas deal. That one is on page 24. A 13-year-old missing Abuja flood victim found dead. That's on page 5. Plateau Gombe snake bite dealt sore as floods stack residents and of course reptiles. It's on page 3 of the Punch newspaper.
All right, Kieran, we also look at the Daily Trust window page. Daily Trust window page, below the nameplate, says still in captivity. 11 schoolgirls of FGC Birime Yauri, 495 days. One student of Bethel Baptist High School, Kujama, 468 days. National Assembly can't prosecute corruption cases. That's according to Lawan. Islamic Development Bank approves 788 billion naira funding for Nigeria. And Rishi Sunak takes over as British Prime Minister today. Troops nab Boko Haram kingpins in Abuja and Kano. High security at government offices in satellite towns. FCTA, that's Federal Capital Territory Administration, orders CCTV in public places. Residents ask government to be proactive. Police launch counter-terrorism exercise. The photograph there on the front page is from Kaduna, showing persons living with disabilities during a rally to commemorate the 2022 World International Polio Day. And produce flood prevention plan in 90 days, Buhari tells minister. That's on page 6. 3 suspects supplying sexual enhancers and SIM cards to bandits arrested. And court orders final forfeiture of Desianis Abuja houses and cars. Kano, that's Nnamdi Kano, appeal court reserves ruling on federal government's stay of, that's federal government's application for stay of execution of the order of the Court of Appeal discharging Nnamdi Kanu. We have details of that on page 12. So that's the outlook on the front page of the
the interesting one, which you just read, the Rishi Sunak, becoming a British Prime Minister. The young man is in his 40s. He's a young man who is Indian by blood, British by birth, and he's a high professional politician in the UK. And of course, from the records that we have, the young man is worth over 800 million pounds. I mean, he has been doing well in business, from what I read about him. So it's a healthy development. I mean, that he could rise to that level politically, in UK. It's not a mean feat, if you ask me.
Well, that's right. It's a historic moment, as it were, for ethnic minorities in the United Kingdom and a person of Asian descent, that's South Asian descent, being India. The parents, of course, migrated from Kenya, were told, to the United Kingdom in the 1960s, and he was born in May of 1980, so he's 42 years now. And under Boris Johnson, he was Chancellor of the Exchequer. That's the equivalent of the Minister of Finance. And if you also recall, he contested for the leadership of the Conservative Party along with Liz Truss, but of course he lost her to Liz Truss, and then Liz Truss then became the Prime Minister, lasting only 45 days. So this is a significant development. Sunak is, of course, a very well-educated person. He attended Oxford Stanford. Oxford continues to offer PPE. That's what we call philosophy, politics, and economics. That's combined honors. One of the things that one would draw attention to is that you are unlikely to see persons collecting funds for Ashwebi to celebrate his ascendancy as leader of the Conservative Party, and then ultimately, much later today, when the king directs him to form a government, he then becomes the British Prime Minister. Britain, of course, is a deep economic crisis. Exactly. There's no question about that. It's a deep economic crisis, but the markets have responded positively to the development of his emergence as
I think his emergence has really turned some events around even before he's sworn in. So we want to see we could see a brighter future for British economy if he gets in there. But there's another thing that I'd like us to talk about. This issue of action plan for flogged and all of that. My concern there is the fact that, look, we have predictions about flood in this country. They come months before the actual flooding that we've been experiencing over the years. And one would have expected, that even without presidential directive, that the agencies, states and the other, stakeholders should, as a matter of urgency, as a matter of fact, as a matter of proper reasoning, to begin to plan towards mitigating the flood, because it will surely come. It's something that you're almost 100% sure that it's going to come, and we know the track, the pathways, and I mean,
and we normally have the guests here on Good Morning Nigeria to talk about these things, and others just assume that these things don't matter. I recall a couple of years ago, probably that situation has changed now. Well, we were informed on the program live that there was a state government that had an emergency management agency. And you know the number of employees it had in that agency? 2. 1, 2. So how do you deal with an emergency when it arises? So, but I think that getting a plan is also useful, so that we know what steps to take ahead, during and after.
In fact, my concern is not even, they don't have to wait for presidential directive. That's my concern. Like, these are statutory responsibilities of certain agencies and individuals who are running the affairs of those agencies. You have to get your job done. What is the plan? Mitigation. How do we mitigate? Simple. You blockade. You put certain things to. That's what we do. So what is the plan? Let's discuss the plan.
Yeah, but it requires a lot of
funding.
It requires thinking,
funding, logistics, and it depends on the terrain of the particular area in question. For instance, Lokoja, what the governor did there some time ago was to build a kind of, embankment, and it's working, it is working to some extent, right? So if other states who are in the coastal area should do the same thing, then collectively, but when the thing comes, it will be
mitigated. That's right. The story about Desiade and the court ordering the final forfeiture of our houses and cars, probably this would not bring closure to the issues around the property. That's fine. But I think that the next big story that Nigerians will be waiting for will be, one, the apprehension and prosecution of those who have been engaged or who have been engaging in crude oil theft in the country. You couldn't have connected a 6-inch illegal pipeline to a trunk line for the evacuation of crude oil and years. It had been going on for years. So who were those responsible for the crude oil theft? So it's not just sufficient that the stories have been broken. The company engaged by the NNPC and all that, that's the company run by Government Tompolo. It's unearthing all of it, but who were those responsible? That's the next big story.
Exactly.
The next big story.
And it's a network. The guys in the front line who actually did the real operation, they are not the owners of the business. Some other persons are owners of the business, right? So if there are arrests that could lead to this, is economic sabotage. Completely. This one is the highest level of economic sabotage. It's the only source of revenue, and people are tampering with it over the years uninterrupted.
Yeah, before we wrap up, there are two, very quickly, I know that we're getting pressed for time for this segment. 2 stories I want to draw attention to. One has to do with what happened in Lafia. That's the Nasarawa state capital. There's been a report, and the university authorities have also responded to it. That's the Federal University at Lafia. There was a report of a young lady who is a student who was beaten up by a lecturer in the Department of History, along with some family members of that, because the young lady was said to have had an altercation and a fight with another lady who is the daughter of the lecturer over a boyfriend. So the lecturer now mobilized members of the family to flog the young 20-year-old one, the young lady named Blessing, over an incident. The lecturer's daughter, and the young lady, as I said, were having a tiff over a boyfriend, and then the father decided to wade in, and of course I understand that he was picked up.
He defended his daughter.
He has no business getting involved in the first instance. The university authorities have issued a statement lambasting the particular lecturer and saying that his behavior, of course, undermines the core values.
Exactly. I've been in the institution, exactly.
The other one, very quickly, we mentioned it now before we call it time. The EFCC has arraigned 4 persons for vote buying in the Osun governorship election. The Osun governorship election took place in July this year, on the 16th. So they have been arraigned over allegations of vote buying. They've been granted bail, and the trial is coming up sometime next month. Good development. Some persons were also earlier arrested in Ekiti. What is the update on that story?
Well, let's just conclude this segment for now. We hope to return tomorrow with another session of newspaper review. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, we'll focus our attention on today's matter, talking about debt profile in the country. Stay with us.
A new edition of TV Guide is out, featuring an impeccable personality with purposeful leadership. Alhaji Mohammed Mitakobi, the Executive National President of Road Transport Employers Association of Nigeria.
In 774 local governments, will be able to put all our structures in everywhere. I'll be able to bring the retained members together, reconcile them to come and work for the progress of the association.
Welcome to a world of fun and excitement as we also present an assemblage of professionals in the media space. Some compelling NTA programs, current trends in the fashion world, ICT, sports, entertainment, and lots more. Get a copy at the vendor near you or any NTA station nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
Oh, that John. But what's he come bring all of Monaco Hospital?
We just come to make we collect our second dose of COVID vaccine.
For your pregnant wife?
Madam, women will get belly and women will get breastfeed. They come strong for who will supposed to collect the vaccination because it will protect them and their pikin from to catch the virus. Plus, it is safe well.
That's the reason why myself I carry my lovely wife come so that no she forget beg that protection join. It's like say our time don't reach. Madam Naija, make you follow me more road.
Try collect the vaccine because it will protect your pikin from COVID-19, plus all your family members and your neighbors sef. That Oga Sabi road o, shey you no go follow Umo road.
My name na Dr. Chinonso Egemba. Then they call me Aproko Doctor. The COVID-19 vaccine na ogbonge way to take protect you and your family from wahala, sickness and death from COVID-19. To get your own free COVID-19 vaccine, sharply go any healthcare facility wey near you.
Finally, the hero of Nigeria's democracy has arrived. He shall usher us into a new phase of development, peace, and prosperity. He is the father of the new Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR. Welcome to another season of giving Nigerians hope yet again. We are sure of a great future for both ourselves and generations yet unborn. We look forward to your leading us as a nation into our manifest destiny. Though the challenges against us as a people are many, we know that your leadership shall set us on the right path to our greatness. A new dawn beckons on us all, and having you as our president is a precursor to this. Thank you for believing in Nigeria. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
As the 2023 elections draw near, remember, evil prospers when good men and women only wish for peace, but never take a step to make peaceful elections happen. Are you a father? Are you a mother? What are you saying to your children as the elections approach? Have you warned them not to let themselves be used to cause violence? Have you explained to them what the consequences of electoral violence might be? Do your part to make peaceful elections happen. Talk to your children. Protect them from unscrupulous politicians who want to put them in harm's way, while their own children are comfortable at home, within and outside the country. Let's join hands to make 2023 elections peaceful. This message is from the National Orientation Agency, NOAA.
Critical military objectives of total defeat of the terrorists in the northeast is already been achieved. Synchronized group and air operations have continued to inflict huge casualties on the terrorists, and they have been forcing many of them, including their commanders and emirs, to surrender in droves with members of their families. Whilst areas where terrorists hitherto had some freedom of actions are being cleared and socio-economic life is gradually returning to the most parts of the Northeast. As well, internal displaced persons are now returning to their ancestral homes to start life all over in dignity under a safe and more secure environment.
This message is brought to you from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, well, thank you for staying with us. Now, to set the tone for our discussion on debt profile and the subsidy regime, let's now join Garba Natala for this background report.
For several years now, strategies have been put in place by successive administrations to generate revenue, but this has sadly not helped in reducing the country's debt profile. Nigeria's debt service to revenue ratio remains high, in spite of government's initiatives to increase returns from the non-oil sector and in the oil industry. The Debt Management Office estimates Nigeria's total debt profile at 41.60 trillion naira as of March 2022, representing 92% service ratio when compared to last year, which stood at 76% in 2021. To this end, experts have attributed Nigeria's high debt profile to shortfall in revenues and funding of budget deficits. Experts say Nigeria is in a worrisome situation as more loans are obtained from external sources with the growing debt gap and a huge servicing cost. While analyzing Nigeria's 2022 Physical Performance Report for the first quarter of the year, Minister of Finance Zainab Ahmed said budget financing will be supported through borrowings due to paucity of funds.
Our solution is to just get out of this subsidy regime. Whichever way you cut it, the regulators now, the midstream downstream regulatory authority has made a commitment that they are putting in place measures to be able to track the distribution of petroleum products to the fuel stations.
With these developments, how can Nigeria sustain high economic growth from recession for the third time? What more can be done to cut Nigeria's debt service figure down? And should government consider removing subsidy on petrol to addressing issues of budget deficits without recourse to borrowings? Guests on the program will speak to these issues and more.
Many thanks, Garba Natala, for that background. Here with us in the studios, we're glad to have the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Dr. Zainab Ahmed. Honorable Minister, good to see you after a while on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
All right. Also part of this conversation will be two regular guests on Good Morning Nigeria, development economist, Professor Ken Ife. Prof?
Thank you. Good morning, Nigerians.
Yes, and of course the other regular guests. As a matter of fact, Good Morning Nigeria analyst when it comes to financial matters. We have Neo Akinsejo. He's a financial and investment analyst. It's also good to have you join us this morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right. Honorable Minister, we're going to begin with you. I'll stay with you for a while before we bring in the two other guests. Our focus is on Nigeria's debt profile and subsidy regime. But before we get into those specifics with regard to fuel subsidy and the current debt profile, we would like to interrogate issues around the economic health of the country. Some argue that we're having a cost of living crisis on account of galloping inflation, well over 20% now, pressure on the naira, and the fact that there are uncertainties about getting the next meal and all that. How well is the economy doing from your books?
Well, thank you very much again for the opportunity to be here today to interact with you. These are indeed difficult times for the whole world, not just for Nigeria. We just came back from the World Bank IMF meetings. The two Brunswick institutions have downgraded, projected a lower GDP than they projected 6 months ago. And the projection is 2023 GDP, global GDP could go as low as 1%. And that a lot of economies will go into recession, including the US. So these are difficult times. The Fed, that is the central bank of the US, and other major central banks across the world are working to tackle the issue of high inflation, and what they're doing is monetary tightening. And the impact of that means that interest rates go up across the world. In the case of countries like Nigeria, the value of our currency is affected by those, and it means our own inflation also goes up as a result of that. The cost of living is greatly impacted by the high cost of inflation. In our case, the major push factor is food inflation. Food inflation is caused largely by the high cost of energy. In our case, the high cost of diesel, which shows up in the high cost of transportation of goods, especially from the farms to the market. So even though the country has done well in terms of increased food production, and also when you look at the details of the data, you find that the cost of food at the farm gates has been decreasing. But when it gets to the market, the cost is high. And for us, the concern is it's affecting our people as food prices rise. His Excellency the President has asked the National Food Security Council, I'm a member, he's the chair with the Governor of Kebbi as a co-chair, and a number of agriculture ministers and a number of other ministers as members, to work towards providing solutions on mitigating the cost of the high food. And this is, in our case, worsened by the recent floods that we're witnessing across the country, because as a result of the floods, a lot of farmers are negatively affected. They've lost their crops. It means we will have less food products in the market. So we're looking at how to provide initially very quick support for dry season farming. Just yesterday, we released funds to 1.8 million farmers, an average of 8,000 naira, very small farmers, to enable them buy inputs for their farming, including bags. We did something like that last year, but that was for fertilizer support. The amount varies according to the size of your land, but I'm just giving an average number. So in addition to that, we have to also look at procuring seeds. Thankfully, there's a lot of research institutions in the country that produce seeds. We have to buy seeds, as well as look at how to further support with fertilizer. Just supporting input so that there will be more people that are able to get involved in the dry season farming, to make sure that there's more agricultural products in the market.
Okay, thank you. I mean, you are giving a good background, to this conversation with respect to the current economic situation in the country. As I rightly pointed out, it's quite global, but one would also like to ask as to whether we, knowing what was coming right from the COVID-19, era, the shock absorbing mechanisms, that one could lay hands on when we find ourselves in this kind of a situation. Because presently, the World Bank has just said that Nigeria has one of the lowest debt to GDP ratios, but one of the highest debt service to revenue ratio, and all of that. So could that have been, if this situation is alluded to, could that have been the reasons you gave that gave rise to that? And if yes, is there any means by which we can reverse the trend?
No, it's not. It's global occurrences, including especially climate issues, that is costing the push in inflation. In the case of Nigeria, we have had an economy, an economy that has been growing consistently. So now we have reported 7 quarters of consecutive growth at 3.54% is a good level. We have for the first time exceeded the population growth rate in the last 2 quarters. So that is a good sign. But I'm saying there are global occurrences that will also affect Nigeria. We have also been working through our strategic revenue growth initiative to improve our revenue. Again, like you just reported, our debt service, our total debt portfolio is at a healthy level, at 22.5 to 23% is at a healthy level. The problem we have is that of revenue. Unfortunately, we are significantly challenged because our oil revenues have been grossly underperforming, contributing very little to the Federation revenues, despite the work that we've done and turn around the performance of non-oil revenues. You see that non-oil revenues is consistently from 2021 outperformed the budget. We have improved the efficiencies of government-owned enterprises. Government enterprises last year contributed 1.3 trillion to the Federation revenues. 3 years ago, it was about 200 billion. So there's a lot that we are doing to increase non-oil revenues. But oil revenue, even though it's in the last 2022 budget is about 35% of the revenue contribution, it's very key because it is still the main source of foreign exchange earnings to the country. So when the revenues are not coming in, it means we have no new FX inflows into the Federation. That has a lot of other consequences on both the fiscal and monetary arrangements in the country. So we've also to strengthen the performance of the revenue, we got approval for a program that we call AMO, which is program designed to push through performance for results some certain revenue streams, including excise duties, different kinds of levies, continuously expanding the tax net, using more of technology to drive tracking as well as collection of different revenue streams. We're also cutting back on tax expenditures, which is very significant, and that also sucks up some of our revenue. 2021, the tax expenditure projected was about 5 trillion. So that is revenue forgone. So that also we're trying to address in the 2022 Finance Act to cut down on that so that it frees up the space for more revenue to accrue to the Federation. When we see the results of some of these efforts, it will increase the size of the revenue and moderate the the debt service to revenue ratio. So what we have to do collectively is to actually work to increase revenue.
All right, Honorable Minister, thank you. But while still on this, help our viewers understand the philosophy behind the debt management of the country. And the question arises from the following. In recent years, we have heard the argument being made that, Nigeria's debt to GDP ratio is healthy. You repeated that this morning. But that our challenge is with revenue. Now, if the challenge with revenue is persistent, why then are we getting into more debt through borrowing, such as indicated, for instance, in the financing of huge aspects of next year's budget?
Well, we're borrowing for infrastructure, but unfortunately, there are also consumption items that are compelling us to borrow more. And one of them is the fuel subsidy. If we're able to free the country from the burden of fuel subsidy, for example, in the 2023 budget proposal, the fuel subsidy is about 3.325 trillion. So that is money we will have to borrow because the oil and gas sector itself is not generating the revenue, and we have a fiscal deficit. So assuming we say no for a subsidy in 2023, that is 3.325 trillion less that we have to borrow, and that will improve not only the debt numbers, but also it will improve on the debt to revenue ratio, because the more you borrow, the higher also the debt service will become. So we do hope that Nigerians will work with us, leaders from all shades of opinion will work for us to exit this fuel subsidy this time around. We made an attempt to exit in 2022 June. It didn't work out. Mr. President listened to the concerns of leaders and of Nigerians that because the economy had gone through some hardship and there was still a lot of difficulty, that people were going to be negatively impacted. And truly, when you remove subsidy, there will be some hardship, but it is for a short period, and then things normalize. What happens in Nigeria, if you announce it today, things go up tomorrow automatically. Even the person selling oranges on the roadside will tell you that fuel price has increased. So, but it's also not unique to Nigeria. All countries that have held on subsidy for a long time, when they're exiting, face those difficulties. So it's something we should anticipate. And how are we planning to manage the exit? We have designed a package to provide succor by way of fiscal support, so like monetary support, to the most vulnerable segments of the Nigerian society for a short period, maybe a period of 6 months, maybe maximum 9 months, in the form of cash transfer or whatever other means we will end up concluding with the other ministries that are supposed to be responsible, to provide some kind of a cushion for a short period, and hopefully by that period things will stabilize. And also with the coming on stream of the Dangote refinery and the NNPC refineries that will begin to come on stream from Q1 of 2023, the cost of the PMS itself will reduce because we will be buying it locally, saving the cost of importation itself.
Okay, thank you. You really pointed out a lot of very important points. That we need to also deliberate on as we make progress in this conversation. So let's just give you a break for now and go to the gentleman who we have assembled as well to, of course, a big part of it. But one thing we made clear, is that because I had thought that what you told Nigerians was that next year we're going to spend 6 trillion naira in oil in the fuel subsidy. But you made it clear, and I say 3.3.
So it will have been 6 trillion if it was January to December.
Okay.
So we were able to convince the Federal Executive Council and the Parliament to limit it to 6 months. So that's why it's half.
All right, because many Nigerians are saying that we don't even know the quantity of fuel we consume on a daily basis, or on monthly basis, or annual basis, as case may be, to be able to determine how much money will be allotted to, the subsidy. So let's begin, Professor Kenny here. We also like you to look at the economy holistically, all right, for us to appreciate your own perspective as to the state of the economy as of today. Considering, of course, some of the factors we have raised, earlier on. There's food scarcity, there's inflation, there's hunger in the land, and all whatnot. So let's feel your own perspective.
Let me begin by commending the minister for being forthright, because the worst thing you can do is not to tell the country the truth. She lays it bare, and we know where we are. And so I will spend my time engaging on the fact, but spend my time on constructive solutions. So we do know that there is a large measure of global shocks and supply chain disruptions that are affecting our economy and pushing up these figures. That's without a doubt. And it is so because we are still a largely import-dependent economy. And when you are an import-dependent economy, you are exposed to the shocks, external shocks. And that means that you are vulnerable to all the transmissions of supply chain disruption. That's why we're in trouble. Any little thing that happens, look at all the crises, the last 3 crises, they all impacted us, not because
we ought to, but it's because we are locked into that. So we have a lot of imported inflation after accounting for this current inflation. Then the second aspect is on the debt, which Madam has explained. We do know that we are low on ratios, but the reality is that we're going to open our revenue because we are the lowest, about the lowest in Africa in terms of revenue, at 7 to 8% revenue to GDP, government revenue to GDP. Average is about 15%, and some of our comparative nations are doing 18. Even South Africa is about 22. But we are there. There's work in progress because I could see the aggressive pursuit of raising more revenue across all spectrum, and I can see those. But we need to do more. Then we come to the monster called NNPC, which we love because the PIA opened it up and created more opportunity for government revenue to come. But we have big challenges there. Some of the challenges are hitting the fiscal space, and some are hitting the monetary space. For example, the failure to sort out our subsidy issue, supply, means that we are now talking about borrowing about 6 point something trillion. Half of it will be in June. I've always believed that we should not be subsidizing consumption. We should subsidize production. And there are creative ways of dealing with this issue because we do know companies that are prepared to build 6, 7, 8 modular refineries for us and want to be paid in crude oil. So there are solutions there. But the second area that upsets the entire monetary space is the crude swap, which the NNPC does. And why that is significant is that about $3 billion every month should have been hitting the CBN, and then CBN disburses about 1.8 billion every month. But with the crude swap, you don't see that. Now that is significant because 79% of our foreign income comes from crude, 10% comes from gas, and the remaining 10% is what we are scratching for FDI, for diaspora remittance, and all of that. So it's difficult. It's difficult because the inflationary pressure it will bring is just one that is completely outside everybody's control. But I'm glad that the ministry are now thinking of, look, let that transaction go through, and then so there are positive move to arrest that, because otherwise it's going to be very tough. Then the other area is when we come to the hardship that people are feeling. The biggest one is inflation, because it erodes the income, and you will get the labor back again for you to increase the wage. And then it's, we have to spend more on palliatives to try and hold the line. The thing is that food sub-basket index is the biggest driver of all the 5 indices in inflation. You have food sub-basket index, you have core inflation, you have CPI, which is the headline inflation, you have urban and rural. And there are distortions, and they're all changing their shapes because of the new reality that now you have flood coming in. Flood means that we're going to over 300,000 hectares are sitting underwater. What it means that the major item there, which is rice, is now going to be, we have to do something radical. We have to either seriously fund the dry season farming to replace that capacity, or we may have to quickly import some grains and some paddies so that the factories that are geared to producing, refining, will not send their workers home. So you now have double tragedy that not only that they can't harvest their rice, which is underwater, but the people that are already milling can't mill. So we have to have, if we have strategic reserves, we have to release them right now, because this is the time of rise in inflation, cyclical inflation. By December, when we have the festive season, that's where we hit the highest in inflation. So if we don't bridge that before we have that, the figure will continue to be high until January, February.
All right, Professor Kenneth, thank you. Maybe before I bring you into the conversation, something occurred to me, Kira, and I thought I should revert to the Honorable Minister to clarify this. Earlier we asked to say, look, this is the quantum of our debt. Our debt to GDP is heavy, revenue is weak. When we are talking about our debt to GDP being healthy, are we talking about the stock of the federal government debt, or we are talking about the stock of the national debt? And then when we are also talking about revenue and debt, are we talking about the revenue of the federation or the revenue of the federal government?
Well, The debt to GDP ratio, the total debt stock, 42.84 trillion, is national. And 84% of that is for the federal government. The balance is for the states. It doesn't include private sector debt. The debt to GDP to revenue ratio that we report is federal government. It's not the states, because we're measuring it against federal government's revenue. If we're going to measure for the nation, we have to aggregate the rest of the revenue of the states, federation revenue, as well as IGRs from the states. And we now have the opportunity to do that because we've been able to, the Nigerian Governors Forum has a platform now, and they've been able to aggregate the budgets and the performance of budgets of states. So subsequently we'll be able to do that, but in the past we were not able to. It's after accounts are audited and we get copies of the financials before we have data on the states. Now it's a bit more current.
All right, which is to say that when it is announced that we have a revenue challenge, that comes from the federal government side, obviously.
That's not to say that the states don't have revenue challenges.
Yeah, I mean, Lagos continues to brag about, it's the size of his IGR.
Lagos is the highest generator in terms of revenue, I think, followed by the FCT, but there are a lot of states that are struggling. Some are struggling to pay salaries as well. So, and they're in different places, but across board we have been seeing incremental performance of revenues, because everybody realized that there is no option than to increase revenue. So we can say, with the support that the federal government has provided under the state fiscal transparency program, which is a performance for result program, we see a lot of aggressive push by the states, because we designed a program in partnership with the World Bank for the states to meet certain fiscal milestones, and once they reach it, there's some money they can draw down. And it's been very interesting watching the competition.
Yes. That's an incentive, right?
You know what she said is very germane, but again, on the other side of it, you find that some state governments are indeed lazy. I'm sorry, I mean, if I've used a harsh word here, in terms of being creative and knowing how to source these revenues in their own states and what have you. There are many states that are paying a lip service to agriculture, for instance, or who have any good program on agriculture and other aspects. How do you now get revenues and all of that? Well, that's another issue for another day. But let's bring it here now. I mean, the Honourable Minister and the Professor Kenife, have already given us a direction, to this conversation, and I'm sure you're going to bring in your own perspective to that. Look at Nigeria holistically, economically, and our present situation, and possibly the way out of it.
In particular, the cost of living crisis.
No, perhaps we should start from UK.
We are not UK.
What is interesting is that I think more than 50% of remittances in Q2 2022 came in from UK. So, I mean, that has an impact on our own reserve and whatever our own standard of living too. So, to a large extent, what happens outside impacts us inside. And we must, whatever we are doing domestically, we must also keep an eye on what is going on outside. Especially what is going on in our traditional partners, UK, US, India. Those are traditional, China, those are traditional partners. And whatever impacts them impacts the quality of our economy. And that is what we are seeing now. If you have a UK economy, inflation at more than 10%, it is evil as far as the average Briton is concerned. Because that's an economy that had always insisted on capping inflation at 2%. So the rate of increase of their inflation had been higher than ours in the last 3-4 quarters. So now I don't need to recast the fact of imported inflation here now. But what it means is that we'll still be importing things from the UK. Our manufacturers will be importing raw materials. our general population will be importing household items and all that. So it will reflect. So that's going beyond the analysis around food inflation and all that. But what is distressing really is this issue of revenue. And I took time to do a background research, on what our earnings had been in the recent of it, because people have been talking about debts, taking loans and all that. I am thinking, why would the government deliberately make debt accumulation a policy? So I did a 2016 to 2020 analysis and realized that from crude oil, which had been the traditional 80-90% foreign exchange earner for us, we made about 120 billion between 2016 and 2015 and 2020. 120 billion. And that's for an economy of more than 200 million people, with more than 100 billion infrastructural deficits, And you also have salaries to pay and all that. It definitely says that we have been underwater all these past 7 years, as it were. And the only way to complement that, to get out of that water, will be to also suck yourself out, because the truth of the matter is you need money to get money. And for me, that's a strong justification for taking loans, especially if it is targeted at providing provisioning for infrastructure, that has inbuilt cash flow within it itself. So I think what we need as Nigerians now is that nationalistic fervor to understand where we are. Because where we are, it is, we can say it is self-inflicted because it is historical. Between 2010 and 2015, we had an excess crude account that accumulated up to $61 billion by 2015 in 5 years. Unfortunately, by 2015, it reduced to $2.1 billion. And since then, we've not been able to build it. Again, because of the price of crude oil and the quantity produced. And that's supposed to be a buffer when you run into a problem in an economy that is trying to go into resilience. And I must make that point. This economy is developing some character of resilience. In the past, we cannot say of such. Today, we are saying we have revenue from taxes, cushioning, and of course it's not in absolute terms, but cushioning the effect of deficient revenues earned from crude oil. That's some bit of resilience for me, and if we can correct what we have by the errors and whatever we are having in the crude oil segment and gas, it also means that over time we'll be able to boost revenue. But going forward, what do we do? I think it is criminal to borrow money to pay subsidy. It does not make economic sense. It lacks logic, because it just means that we are borrowing money to pay consumption, not consumption that can even determine its impact on production or productivity. So when there is no reason to do certain things, it is no longer just about convenience, because we say, because we produce crude in our jurisdiction, we must also benefit from crude. But again, it has also turned into a burden on us. That's turned into a collective burden on our economy. So I think it's important we start looking at that segment. One, subsidy in itself is not appropriate. The worst thing now is that we are going to borrow money to pay subsidy. And it's no fault of the government, because we are not earning enough.
All right. Thank you very much. We are getting into an opaque region one more time. Honorable Minister, one question that has often bothered me is, when we're talking about subsidy, whom are we subsidizing? You hear about the quantum of fuel that Nigeria or Nigerians are supposed to be consuming. One day you will hear 60 million liters of fuel. Claire and I have discussed this on Good Morning Nigeria. I don't fill my tank every day. I don't drive from Lokoja to Abuja to come to work. Those who have 10 cars in their premises don't drive those 10 cars at the same time. So if you fill your tank, it will last you a while. And there was an embarrassing situation some weeks ago when the Comptroller General of Customs contradicted the figures being given by NNPC with regard to the quantum of fuel and the allegations about smuggling and so on and so forth. Do we have the numbers? Do we have the numbers so that we actually know what we are subsidizing, and it isn't just some fiction that people are cooking up figures and say, no, 65 million liters this month. No, last month it was 72. And people are just banding. How many vehicles are there in Nigeria? How many vehicles are in the neighboring countries? They say our fuel gets from here right up to Sudan. If fuel in plain sight up to Sudan, how many vehicles are there in Sudan? Half of the vehicles in Nigeria are said to be in the Lagos-Ogun area. So how many vehicles, are we drinking petrol? Minister.
Well, very interesting question, and I can see how agitated you are. That's how I get as well. But, you know, as the Ministry of Finance, Budget and Planning, we get inputs from different sectors of the economy to prepare the fiscal plans for the Federation, including the budget. And the input that we get on PMS subsidy is from the National Oil Company, the NNPC Limited. And the data they provided, and we keep asking, is this consumption data? They insist that it is truckouts. That they provide the subsidy numbers based on truckouts from tank farms, which is the number of trucks that leave the tank farms. It is an open secret that a lot of trucks actually drive out of our country. So we're not only subsidizing Nigerians, we're also subsidizing the immediate sub-region, all of our neighbors. But who is benefiting from the subsidy? It will be the people that have multiple cars. Certainly the ordinary man that just uses a bus or a truck. Those ones actually use diesel, not PMS. So our point of view is this subsidy is retrogressive, is not benefiting the Nigerian that really needs to have that circle, and also the beneficiaries are actually the people that are selling the PMS. I reported when we were doing the budget presentation that the downstream regulator has made a commitment to put tracking devices to be able to track how much goes to filling stations in Nigeria. So we're waiting for that data. We don't believe that the consumption is 60 or 65 million, but the budget for 2023 is based on the 65 million that was provided, the number of liters per day, the NAFEX FX rate. That's how it's calculated and provided for in the budget. What comes to what is now taken is the actual that NNPC shows us figures that they spent to buy the subsidy. But even the figures, I'm sure, will be centered around these projections that they provided to us. So it is indeed opaque, and the solution is to just exit it. That's the solution.
Yeah, it's very important. Exiting it. You have said earlier on that there should be modalities to that. I mean, there should be a plan for it, at least to cushion the effect of it, because there must be effect and what have you. So let's hope that will happen. But again, Nigerians are also thinking in the direction of the non-functionality of our local refineries, that most of them are dysfunctional. Even the modular refineries that have been approved are functional at the moment. They're concentrating on diesel, instead of petrol, because diesel is a lot easier, to get in terms of the processes and what have you. So if we are going to rely ultimately on the Dangote refinery, I'm wondering whether it will also provide what we require, because Dangote is also producing for the international community. If what laid down is the project is to go by, so he is also producing to sell outside Nigeria, not just within Nigeria. Okay, as we get on, let's have an understanding, Professor Kenneth, of what is called concessional and semi-concessional loans. Well, these loans that we are getting, yes, we are compelled to do that based on, what is playing out economically, globally, and of course locally here. Because we're still going to pay back these loans. So what is concessional and non-concessional? Let Nigerians to understand this, and of course the loans from multilateral lenders, such as World Bank, and so let's understand it and know the kind of loans that we are getting, and probably how to repay these loans, so the possibility or the mechanism that we put in place to repay these loans as time goes on.
May I just give some numbers so that you can comment on the numbers as well? Our total borrowing right now, in terms of the mix between domestic and foreign, is at 65-35. So which means 35% of our borrowing is foreign. And of the foreign borrowing, 48 of the total percent is multilateral. That is concessional loans from the World Bank, African Development Bank, and such like. These are loans that are at 1.25%, 20-year tenor, 5-7 years moratorium. So they're very good loans. Then we have bilateral loans from countries like China, France, Germany. Those are 12% of the foreign portfolio. Then we have promissory notes, which you've started issuing in the last 3 to 4 years, 1%. Of the dollar denominated ones are 1% of the portfolio. Then we have commercial loans, so that's the Eurobond ones. Those are 39% of the portfolio. So where I'm reporting this is that the largest proportion of our loans are actually the foreign loans are actually low cost, because even the bilateral loans, you find the rates are 1.5 within a very healthy region. There's none that is up to 3%. So it's a good mix that we have made sure under the debt management strategy that we put in place.
Yeah, thank you for providing that clarification. The Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007 provides for reason for borrowing. You say we have to borrow for capital expenditures or for human resource development. And for human resource, we look at education, health, employment. And then, of course, that definition was widened up a little bit by the Finance Act 2021. Then it also says that the borrowing should be for longer term and on concessional rates. And we understand concessional rate to be less than 3%. So on those bilateral loans and multilateral loans, we seem okay. We're okay then. And on general rebalancing, I know that the objective at some point from 2017 has been to rebalance 40-60. So to be performing 35 is showing that we are heading there, in terms of foreign portfolio and debt and local domestic debt portfolio. Now, the other aspect is that some of the commercial debts are obviously much higher than what it provides. And then there are other debts that we haven't actually been talking about. For example, the overdraft by central bank to the government, which is about 19.9 trillion. And the challenge we have there is that the law itself actually says no more than 5% of the previous revenue of the government, which should have been less than 1 trillion. But that is a different story, because we had to do what we had to do to rescue the economy. Because the challenges that we faced are 3 existential challenges, for which doing nothing is not an option. It was life and death for COVID. It was life and death for security. 22% of the budget was going to defense. And it was also very, very existential for what's going on unemployment. If you look at the numbers on unemployment, you can't sleep with your eyes closed. So you can understand why the government has to find the money wherever they can find it to take us out of this mess. But the challenge we have there is that the government wants to reschedule that into something like 30-year long-term loan and some moratorium. So that will be helpful. But otherwise, the cost of servicing that debt is more like benchmark rate, 15% now, plus maybe 2%. So that is going to be very high, however you look at it. So we're going to have to go for a longer term or do some of the things we are looking at doing now, which is how do we not to refinance, not to restructure in the way people are calling it, but how do we rebalance? Because some of the rebalancing things is to make some of this to pay off some of the short-term ones and then move in favor of.
But from all indications, so the tendency to keep borrowing is also there, because yes, the tendency to keep borrowing is also there. That I'm not sure we are done yet with the borrowing, considering the situation that we have.
Okay, let me address that. You see, every country borrows, and we are underleveraged in terms of borrowing. And the real challenge, which was revenue, is being addressed decisively. But having said that, you also need to consider the fact that much of our debt is debt financing. We are not doing as well on asset-based financing. You could see in this budget, 205 billion is coming from proceeds from privatization. But that's very small compared to the quantum of what we want to borrow, which is around 10 trillion. So the question now is, how rapidly do we get into the asset financing scene? You could see also in the budget where the minister was pointing at certain things that they've got to privatize very quickly. That's there. But I keep saying, let's look at our biggest asset, which is NNPC. The valuation of NNPC at about $100 billion means that if we can rapidly take NNPC to the stock market, it shouldn't take more than 6 months. They can sell 10%, and that will rake in $10 billion to start solving and addressing this problem. Bearing in mind that the opportunity that we have with NNPC being a private sector company now is the aggression that we are seeing. Suddenly we found out that there are hidden pipelines that are for 9 years sucking away our crude. Suddenly we have also found out that there is a documented report showed 2 days ago in our Rise newspaper morning show that they have found who have been buying this crude, the countries that they have gone to, over $500 billion. So the issue is now, will the government muster the courage to ask American government to prosecute on our behalf so that some of those 500 odd billion will come on shore and help defray the cost? And the many other issues. There are many more issues. So I think we need to be looking at those opportunities because they change the game. And as to whether we need to borrow, you cannot afford to default on loan. And we have a lot of dollar-denominated loans. So we have to pay those. If you can't get the money from NNPC source, then we're going to have to borrow in dollars to pay to service the loan.
Professor Ken, thank you for your explanation. We've had conversations around this subject matter. Nigeria was in a debt peonage from the 1980s up until 2006. And we saw how that, as it were, hobbled our capacity for even domestic policy enunciation, because you had to be taking directives from your creditors through IMF and so on and so forth. Why did we opt to get out of the debt trap by 2006, and then now we keep justifying that we have to borrow? Yes, we have to keep borrowing, but really, are we borrowing right? Are we borrowing right? And I ask this question against the backdrop of saying that, okay, there are capital expenses that we need to invest in XYZ. If you take a breakdown of some of the capital items in each of the budgets, you have to ask questions. What are some of these capital items and human capital development? Some of them are just wasting assets. Vehicles. I mean, yesterday, in the newspaper review segment, we saw the headlines by Daily Trust as to how much some of the NDAs had voted for purchase of vehicles.
And traveling abroad.
I mean, those ones, they come as capital items. And the money just goes. And then you have also seen from the ICPC report that there's misallocation of capital items to agencies or MDAs whose mandate don't cover such things. Street light, you go and give it to a federal polytechnic, to street light, what billions of naira? The mismatch of mandates. So are we borrowing right? Because it is not every picture that the Minister of Finance can see, but people will justify, say, oh, we need XYZ, the numbers go in there, Parliament will do that. Because as you asked, debt accumulation as a policy, why? Take out the subsidy aspect of fuel subsidy. We'll come back to that. But in general, in terms of capital projects and all that, are we borrowing right? Are we ensuring that, as you also said, the inbuilt cash flow system will be such to amortize the loans?
Yeah, well, there's also the perspective of borrowing and the politics of budgeting. So what I have observed really in the Nigerian budgeting is there's a lot of politics, that are involved. They are not just clear-cut, hard-nosed economics. You have the National Assembly insistence on constitutional projects, and it has become historical, and it has even become conventional, for us now. And I don't know how it is done, but when you analyze the budget, you can easily point them out, and it's as if it's a convenience of implementation, that you get to see all that. So I docketed those ones as the politics of budgeting. But on the surface, what we have seen in terms of borrowing, perhaps until recently that we are now hearing about borrowing to pay subsidy, to a large extent, when you borrow for assets, infrastructure, accumulation, deliveries and all that, well, as far as I'm concerned, those are the appropriate policy on borrowing. Then I think more importantly, really, is when we are borrowing now, there should be a participatory consensus, an elite consensus on those things we are borrowing for. Even if they are infrastructure, are they really, will they won't be delivered efficiently? Secondly, in their use, would they, in the shortest period of time, repay the loan as it were? And thirdly, and I don't know how to place this, the politics of budgeting. How do we address it going forward? Because if you have up to 500 billion, between 500 billion, 1 trillion naira, that you cannot actually account for in terms of returns, how going forward, that you start accumulating that over a 10-year period, and you realize that in those 10-year period, you've had an accumulation of close to 10 trillion naira that are not delivered on values. How do you connect to the economy? I think those are the issues one we want, to find solutions to, as it were.
Yeah. It looks like
this issue you raised really needs to be put to bed, because I began by saying that there are 3 existential challenges facing the country, all of which do nothing is not an option. If you don't tackle insecurity, we will be overrun like Afghanistan. All of us will go find a way to the village. There will be no government. If you don't tackle COVID, many people would have been dead. You don't have any discussion at all. You've got to go and find the money. Obviously, you go and start by using your savings. We don't have national savings. So if 22% of the defense budget is not met, the military will pack their bags and go. You are telling them to go and die on the battlefield. We don't have the national savings. We have to borrow the money. That elevates discussion on what are you actually borrowing the money for, and how economic and sustainable is that borrowing. That's a matter that has been settled by the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which I started by giving you what it says. But we have to borrow. Having borrowed, if you don't service the debt, your rating will be brought down, and it will be more difficult for you to borrow again, and you'll be borrowing again at a much higher rate. Yeah. So it doesn't help either way. So when we have to look at the economies that are within our reach, that's why I was shifting the focus on the hegemon that we have, which is NNPC, massive opportunity for us. And I have to tell you something. When you have challenges of the nature that we are having, they actually create more vistas of opportunity. If we didn't face the challenge we had, the government, the president would not have mustered the courage to just sign that PIA and stop those 20 years of going forward and backwards. And that has opened opportunity. Revenue is gone up by about 50%, because FIRs can actually go and collect their royalty and all that. And then you've got hydrocarbon money where an NPC can take 10% and 5% for upstream, midstream, and they're not having to cut their quota according to their size. We will now have a private company. You now see Africa in giving them $5 billion dollar loan. Opportunities that we can affect.
Prof, thanks. Kira, we're taking this topic. No, Kira, hang on a second. Look, Prof, the two issues are different. Earlier you talked about asset realization and then debt versus debt. You focus now on asset realization. If you privatize, once you privatize, you are not going to reprivatize that same entity again. Once the proceeds come, what do you spend the proceeds on? That's the issue. If you borrow, what are you borrowing for?
See, that is where I was.
Other than pure subsidy. Yes.
Exactly. When we borrow, but some say, okay, we borrow because of for infrastructure or development. We borrow for servicing, but perhaps the subsidy and all of that. But if history, if I can still remember, I recall when Brazil was almost the highest debtor, in the world. Brazil then, I think the 80s or
in 1986, Brazil announced that it will no longer service its debts.
Exactly.
But it was borrowing for industrialization.
That's where I was going. Now in Brazil then, industries flourished as a matter of fact. Production, the production, increased. Now hold on, sir. With that production, today, even when some of our people who engage in all these long luxurious bus businesses, transportation, they are buying from Brazil as a matter of fact. As at that time,
Marco Polo and all that.
Marco Polo and what have you. So that's what I'm talking about. This is a country where we have all manner of cars in this country without even a car plant and what have you. And these are policy issues. I understand that. But we are now saying, how do you get revenue? How will revenue come when you borrow? And take care of subsidy, you borrow and build perhaps roads, you won't recover the money in the next 20 years. Yes. So how do you service the debt? I have an answer. We're going to come back to that. You have an answer for that. We'll come back to you.
Because the scope of infrastructure is 35%. The lowest in Africa.
We'll come back to you. All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria on NTA Network Service. So we're going to take a short break now. We'll come back. We'll continue with our lovely guests in the studio, the minister, and me, and of course, Professor Ipe. Stay with us.
Thank you. Hi there. You can price, Sha, but you're always saving on everything except for here. This is where you're throwing money down the drain. How? On this cleaning product. Impossible. You need the new Harpic toilet cleaner. With just 130 naira sachet of Harpic toilet cleaner, you save more. Harpic stick formula stays longer, so it cleans 10 times better. Wow, Helen! And it's safe because it's only 30 naira, giving you a sparkling clean toilet and great savings too.
Trying our best to contain the situation. And in our operations, we've been able to make a lot of recoveries. We've been able to also arrest suspects that are involved in this kind of activities. And we've been able to also recover particularly arms and ammunition from those who are carrying it unlawfully and disturbing the peace of the people. But generally, our morale in the Nigerian police is always guided by our commitment to do what we have sworn to do. Peace and security must be looked into as a priority by all, to look at security as the business of all of us.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Our pastors, our imams, in every church, in every mosque, please realize that in the course of praying for peaceful and transparent elections, we all have duties beyond prayers. If we want a stable society before, during, and after the elections, what should you be saying to those that worship with you? all Sundays, and all Fridays. You are saddled with the responsibility of bringing up good generations. It is therefore your duty to both man and God to ensure peace all the time, no matter about elections alone. People talk to people and people listen. Talk to your followers. Make them listen to ensure peaceful 2023 elections. This message from the National Orientation Agency.
The Ministry of Police Affairs under my watch has been instrumental to strengthening the Nigerian police force to tackle challenges in the internal security architecture of the nation. To effectively achieve its mandate to protect lives and property within Nigeria, the Nigerian police have deployed operational intelligence and the ICT-based apparatus to tackle and stem the tide of crime and criminality. Some of these efforts include the maximization of the Force Intelligence Bureau, Intelligence Response Team, and Special Tactical Squads, through digitalization of emergency contacts via the NPF Rescue Me application for emergency response at the top of your button.
This message is brought to you from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Well, all right, you'll see with us here on Good Morning Nigeria, and Kinsler and I we've been trying to cope with the eggheads that we have here this morning. There are people who are in doubt when it comes to the issues concerning their finances. Now, we know we're talking about revenue. Okay, one of the ministers raised that that's the way we need to go now. How do we now mop up revenue for the country? But we're not been able to address the issue of governance, the kind of huge amount of money we spent in governance, in administration. We have senators, House of Rep members. None of them had nothing less than 2, 4, or 5 cars, attached to them, and it's a huge sum of money. When you talk about budgeting, politics and budgeting is also part of it. And if a budget they allocate to themselves what is so humongous, the Nigerians begin to ask questions. The money they take home on a monthly basis is also questionable. The kind of vehicles they use is also questionable. In a country where there is hunger, in a country where we're lamenting and borrowing money, people in government are driving cars worth 50 million, 100 million, and what have you.
Using luxury
Go to the streets of
Nigeria.
When you see a National Assembly member in his home state moving, it's a convoy. It's a chariot. It's a show. Yeah, and stuff like that. So in such a country, how do you conserve money? Let me give me just one little story. In Indonesia, when I visited Indonesia in 2014, I was privileged to meet with a senator in Indonesia. It's a lady who was once a beauty queen in that country. Her schoolmate in Nigeria asked me to call her for a message when I get to Indonesia. So when Hotel Bordeaux, she came with a car, 500 ACL Mercedes. So when I was telling her, so you put that kind of car here, she said, oh yes, but I paid tax for bringing out this car today. She told a senator that she paid tax to bring out her car for that day because of the nature of the car it is. Do we have enough taxing system, a good taxing system that will tax these people? In Nigeria, somebody will have 10 cars. Meanwhile, this person is just a government official and he has 10 cars. How did he buy them and stuff like that? What amount of tax does he pay to keep those cars on the road and all of that? So do we need a rejigging of the entire system when it comes to revenue, taxing, and what have you? I just throw it open so that anybody can talk about it.
Let's just finish my dog fight.
You want to continue with the?
I want to finish the dog fight with you. Listen, Nigeria's stock of infrastructure is only 35%, and it's the lowest. In fact, it's about 27%. It's the lowest in Africa. The last investment in laying tracks, railway tracks, was in 1927. Look at the roads. I'm not a speaker for the government, but what I can tell you is that there is no highway you do not have workers working in the. They may not have completed any. So I didn't see the last 7 years as what you will come and cancel all contracts and then I'll start awarding new contracts. What I saw was all contractors return to site and you start paying them because that was a cheaper option than to cancel contracts and then all of them will take you to court. They will win the cause against government. Government can't pay their debt. You create new contractors, you can't finance them, and then it's worse. So we have to understand that whilst I'm not in government or speaking for them, what we have in the last 7 years was all contractors return to site. I didn't come here to award new contracts and then you're going to find the money to pay for those contracts. and those ones are being inflated. You can't do anything about that. But there are things we can do something about.
Finding the money, Prof, debt or asset financing.
Correct.
Honorable Minister of Finance.
We'll go more to assets.
Honorable Minister of Finance, what is your take on this? Because I mean, questions have been asked already about, look, our debt servicing is crippling. What can we do in terms of asset financing? Because I raised the point, if you privatize, you privatize. And once you have spent the money, you can't have your cake and eat it.
But one way to raise revenue is to work on raising the taxes. So we have some luxury taxes that we're currently looking at, which will be in the Finance Act for 2022, reviewing excise duties, levies, and so on. But another way is also to sell down on some of the assets that you own. So if you sell down on some of these assets, you are bringing in immediate revenue for government, and it reduces how much government have to borrow. But also, you have the benefit of bringing in a private sector participants that will enhance the efficiency of the performance of that enterprise that you're selling down on. So we're not selling off the assets. So if you take NMPC, for example, and you sell 10%, it is still government that owns 90%. But that private sector participant that owns that 10% will make sure that they have an eye on how the organization is run. If you sell it in the capital market, then it means the NMPC has to arrange its corporate governance and its financials to meet the disclosure requirement of the capital market. That also brings about efficiency, and the efficiency brings about better performance of the company itself. But what we have been doing also in the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning is we are reorganizing the Ministry of Finance Incorporated. There's a unit of government that is called MOFI, that's this Ministry of Finance Incorporated, that currently sits, that has a mandate of investing for government. So NMPC government owns it 100%, for example. MOFI is the owner. CBN, MOFI is the owner of MOFI. So we hold government investments. And over time, this MOFI has been performance has deteriorated to the fact that it's now a small unit under the Treasury. So we've got approvals to reinvigorate it. We're taking it out, turning it into a world-class asset investment company. And we've taken stock of the assets, just initial ballpark without even valuation. We're going to the stage of valuation. We have now a 40 trillion naira assessment of what this company will do. But we'll still do formal valuations. For example, the Nigerian Railway Corporation, which MOFI owns 100%, was listed in the books of MOFI as for 20 million. So we have not taken into account all of these investments in the new rail facilities, that the airports, so many assets that government own. That is one way to raise resources. Even when you go to borrow, when your balance sheet size is large, it has a positive impact on your cost of borrowing. Plus, we now have the opportunity to attract more investment into this government, into these entities that government largely owns 100%, or a major government as a major shareholder. So we'll be able to raise revenue and increase the efficiency of these enterprises by bringing in private sector investments, and also open up opportunities for Nigerians to play in these government entities.
Right, but very interesting. I mean, particularly.
Let me just say that there's Professor Ayu Teriba normally says, so Debt Management Office will periodically report on how much government owes. But we have not been concentrating of how much government owns, and that's what we're doing now. With this process, we can say this is the total size, the actual size of government asset. And countries that have done that have been able to access investments as well as lower cost of financing.
That's why I said it's very interesting that you raise the aspects of Ministry of Finance Incorporated. I mean, it's a historical debate as to why it became virtually moribund or why it shrunk in size. But that's the point. I believe it's a conversation that we can also have on that about Kieran. I would like the Honourable Minister to also speak on this, on the fuel subsidy issue. Now, there's an argument that is in the air that delayed subsidy until June next year, it's the equivalent of stacking up problems for the next administration. which comes on the 29th of May. Now, it's also been argued, and you've repeated it here, Honorable Minister, that there are conditions precedent to the removal of subsidy. Dangote will have come on stream. Some of the NNPC refineries will also have been worked on. But I have, on Good Morning Nigeria, thrown up some concerns about the refineries and what the additional cost just might be. Dangote produces its refined petroleum products. How do you evacuate it from the refinery to the depots and then to other locations? The refineries get working, the network of pipelines. Have those pipelines been fixed, or we are concentrating on AKK, which is a gas pipeline, Ajaokuta, Kaduna, and Kano. The network, which is why Abuja, for instance, is suffering these supply chain disruptions arising from the flooding first at Lokoja and the collapse of one of the bridges on that axis. They say, oh, you have hundreds of trucks that are on the road, ruining our roads, XYZ. So the basic support infrastructure, that's the midstream that will connect the refineries to the depots and then, of course, to the pumps. Those ones have not decided that what impact is this likely to have on pricing and prices, and ultimately, therefore, cost of living if you remove fuel subsidy from June next year.
So let me start first of all by the infrastructure. So now we're using products by trucks. That's one way to move products. But we also have the option of moving products by rail, and that is beginning to actually become a reality, with the Lagos Ibadan rail line also being linked to the Apapa port. So when you import products, they can actually go by rail in the land before they're now moved to the last mile by truck. And the third option is to transport the product through pipelines. Over time, our pipelines have been vandalized, and therefore we're unable to do that. But the new NNPC Limited is floating a company that will be responsible for the pipelines as well as the depots. And this company is expected to reinvest in laying new pipelines that will be really very, very deep in the soil, as well as upgrading the palm tanks. So Dangote will produce refinery in Nigeria, but we still have to move the products for distribution the same way we're doing it now, and hopefully through rail and through the pipeline. This pipeline will be servicing anybody that has product to pass through, and then they will be taking lease. You will be paying lease or rentals for using that. So they will generate revenue to maintain this pipelines. It will help us in having product available locally. It will reduce the cost of the product and make it easier when you are removing the subsidy.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, man. Thank you very much indeed. I just recall Idi Amin days, in Uganda, when his finance minister informed him that there's no money. He told him, what are you talking about? Go and print money. We have the machine. Must you go to UK to print money? And what have you.
Ways on me.
But yeah, and then if you want to buy orange in Uganda, then you carry a basket of money and what have you. So, well, that will happen to us anyways, because of course we have people who are handling these affairs. We thank you for watching this program, and we also like to appreciate our guests this morning, most especially the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed. Thank you, ma, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay. Professor Ken Ife, thank you. Development economics, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. And of course, financial and investment analyst, and also our own person here, Niyi Akinseju. It was a pleasure.
It's a privilege. Thank you very much.
Now, sports is next. Yes, okay.